This is our work session for our first meeting of 2019. I'll let the record reflect that all council members are present, and we're probably going to get through this agenda fairly quickly, and we'll start off with Logan Probst with our administrator update.
Sure, just a few things of note. Of course, we have the planning retreat coming up on January 17th, 9 a.m. at the Livery Stable event space on North Lumpkin. That's to go over a lot of our zoning maps, future land use maps, things like that, just to kind of set the table for where we want to go in the future in the planning realm. Next week, it's not on the agenda tonight because we're still drafting those docs, but we'll have an intergovernmental agreement with the Urban Redevelopment Agency regarding the financing of the police department and municipal court project out at Walton Plaza. So that'll be coming up next week for discussion and action. Just recently, before the end of the year, 2018, we closed on the Cotton Gin property. If you remember, that was part of the deal to get the downtown green property. We worked out a kind of a public-private partnership with some private investors on that project. So we closed on the Cotton Gin portion. So that's now moving forward, and we've got that money reimbursed to the city. Spring Street sidewalk projects, of course, that's been a slow project, but currently dramatically under budget. And what we're going to do with some of the extra savings is go back and add in some more drainage inlets and things like that, and really make the project work as best as we can. You know, first and foremost, it was a sidewalk and streetscaping project, but as we got into it, we really need to make it more functional in the utility realm. So we're going to finish that up over the next couple of months before we get into the punch list items with the contractor to get it cleaned up, restriped, and just looking good for the city. In the meantime, we've got city crews setting street trees and the lights down the sidewalk. So you'll see that taking place over the next few weeks down through there. North Broad streetscape, that's moving along at a pretty good clip finally. Hopefully we'll get some decent weather so that they can finish that project, hopefully on time, towards the end of this year. There's been a lot of utility impediments along Highway 11 there, but overall it's going pretty well.
Fantastic, thank you. Are there any questions?
So at that time, they're going to pull up that old chain link fence at the water plant, right?
Right, so that'll be at the tail end of the project.
Okay.
We'll pull that up, install new decorative and
Okay.
protective fencing, and re-landscape all of that. And I think Rodney's going to go ahead and start on the old water plant, some landscaping of it pretty soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any comments? Hearing none, we'll move to Central Services. Mr. Bailey.
Thank you, sir. Just a quick few highlights from the numbers part of it. Everything pretty much stayed on track with November. Purchasing was down in the month of December, as it typically is. Basically staying within budgets, and then just holidays kind of slows things down. And it rained every day, so kind of limits what you can do. Our IT department, Luke Roberts, who was part-time, became full-time January 2nd, so that's a good addition to our staff. I think a lot of you have actually interacted with him on different situations and different problems. He was a fortunate hire for us, and I'm glad he's sticking around. City Hall, pressure washing, I think, is done. I think he was finishing up as we were starting this meeting, so you kind of look at 2018, we redid, you know, landscaping, irrigation, drainage, pressure wash sidewalks, fountains fixed. Yes, I know it's not running, but we'll turn it on tomorrow. We were trying to buy a little bit of time and hope everything would dry out so that we could come back and refinish it so it doesn't look like a copper stained bit of concrete, but we just decided we're going to wait till late spring, summer, maybe get some dry days in here and do it. So we will turn it back on before it hits 20-something degrees in about 2 nights. I remember last month, I believe I complimented our grounds crew. In 11 days, I think they had picked up about 2,400 pounds of trash. In the month of December, in 13 days, they almost hit 3,000 pounds. So they continue to go at it daily, and that's two guys that continue to work extremely hard. The other thing that I wanted to hit kind of leads us into 2019 is a little bit of a policy change that we had in our capital improvement program and the way it works, and I actually attached that, and then the part that's in the square follows is a copy of what's in the policy. To know that CIP projects that were approved in the budgetary process will now, instead of, to start those, will not come before council for the initial purchase or the initial outlay, but those projects will still be vetted by procurement policy. It will be looked after by Beth Thompson, Logan, myself, to make sure revenues are there, that we can fund things, that we are in a good timing stage of the year to do those. And then the details of those purchases and those projects will come back before council in a monthly report fashion, to where you are given the details of everything that was done, which will be the exact same as before. But it helps us speed up some projects and allows us to kind of eliminate that month, that 30 to 45-day lag of when we go through things, to then have to time it correctly to get it back before council when it's something that's already been discussed in the budget and pre-approved in CIP meetings. And that was essentially the biggest things I had to go through and explain, but I just wanted to give you all a little bit of an update of what to look for in upcoming months as it pertains to that, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any comments, any questions?
Because on the CIP procurement process, again, on this clarification. At times, or I'll start with, I guess, if I understand the policy we've adopted as that if the council approves the CIP budget, everything is in it, at that point can be purchased without coming back before the council, regardless of the amount of money.
Correct.
And with that in mind, there are times when the CIP budget is not all used within the calendar year that we approved it in. So if something is not spent in 2019, for example, it didn't get completed. So when 2020 comes around, is that stay in the CIP budget for 2020 at that time, or does this council have to reapprove it?
Essentially, every budget cycle has to be approved. So if there's money that's in the 2019 that wasn't used, then it has to come back before council for approval prior to being used in that 2020 year. But, I mean, the project will still be there. So if we didn't do the project in 2019, then essentially, by policy and operationally, we just moved that project to 2020. So it would once again appear before council for approval again. You're not going to see projects that were approved for 2019 then not brought before you in 2020 if it carries over. Because there may be projects that start in December.
Right.
And if there's additional money or there's other funding that's required or that project money wasn't used, then it'll be brought before you for that budget cycle as well. So everything will have to be approved per that procurement policy. It's just what we're doing is trying to speed up a little bit of the lag process.
And the other question I have on it is, when we approve the CIP budget, obviously it's with the understanding of that we know how revenue expenses are going to run for the next 14 months or whatever after we've approved this,
Correct.
or for the next 12 months. Is there anything in the policy that allows that at intervals during the year, if revenue expenses are not as we expected it to be, that those items will not be purchased, I guess is my best, because we assume, what the natural situation is going to be for the 12 months. But 6 months, 7 months, 8 months into the year, things are not going as we thought they would because of whatever. I want to be sure we're not still spending the money that we previously approved, in the budget process.
Well, and that's where in the second item, it actually requires the approval of the finance director, who will compare your expenses versus your revenues, and then final approval by the city administrator to make sure that those projects are done when we are capable of doing them. So if all of a sudden, middle of the year, we hit some type of downturn or something happens, our revenues aren't there, then obviously we're going to stop those large expenses because we don't have it, and we've got to have those revenues to cover our operations and not the project side. So yes, that's why it would come before myself, would come before Beth, and then Logan for the final approval.
And also each month, we have the CIP project list in the back now that's included in the financials, so that city council can see kind of where we are cash-wise each month.
To know that you're not
So
overdoing
that
it.
we're not overdrawn or overspent in certain areas.
I don't think y'all care about spending. My question would be, would you have to come, like now, it's supposed to be set up, if y'all start spending over 10,000, you have to come back before city council. Would that change? Or would that,
It would depend on what it is. If it's a pre-approved project, that was why everything that was brought before the budget presentation and the capital improvement program that we presented already had quotes attached, already had the overall concept of what we were going to buy. That was the whole setup of it, was to be a detailed presentation within those CIP documents to then be pre-approved. But an item, as far as it being over 10,000, that would be just, if I went and if I wanted to buy a trailer that was $12,000, no CIP, no nothing, I just needed it. I had my 3 quotes come before council to get approval for that $12,000 number because it's over 10,000. So that, policy will still be followed because it's law, because it's state law, because that's what we follow with procurement. It's just, this allows us to speed up things a little bit if we hit that point to when we can do it and when we need to get started. Like I say, essentially it saves us that 30 to 45-day lag, but every process and every approval and every policy is still followed.
Of course, I would ask that all our department heads make contact with our committee chairs
And
ahead of
update.
time as well, just
Yeah.
keep you guys in the loop. That, hey, we've got Project X coming up on the CIP list. I want to reach out to you and let you know this is coming up. It's really, we did this more for expediency because what we were finding is we're trying to get a project going or something, or a product purchase, but then we were losing out on some of the pricing.
Pricing specials.
Right. And
We
if
we
you're
were
not,
we were missing a lot of that.
just like vehicles, when we get into it with the police department, it's almost like if you're not in that first 2 to 3 months of the year, then all of a sudden you can't get them because everything's already guaranteed out. And if you do, you're going to pay 3, 4, 5,000 more per unit because all of a sudden you're on the back end of production. So it kind of gives us the ability to stay ahead of things without having to try to time everything just perfect. To whereas now, if it's a good situation, revenues are there, expenses are down, the money's there, then we can proceed. And then we inform council in the same way that we would prior.
And we are going with the assumption that budget numbers are working out as normally approved, so if it comes in substantially higher,
Then it
that's
comes
coming
back
anyway.
before council to
Yeah, that-
ask for that additional money.
Okay.
Key to it is it
I've always
stays within
questioned
that.
the need to approve the same thing twice.
I mean, and it would be the same as coming to council for a budget amendment. It would be the same with a capital improvement project. If you're going over, then yes, you have to come and ask for the additional funds prior to proceeding with that project.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Well, and I would assume that during committee reports from the department heads, they would be giving us a heads up, say in January, that, we're looking to go ahead and implement the project that's under CIP. February, we're starting, and just give us updates along.
Correct.
But it is redoing what we've already approved and just adding another layer and having 3 department heads overseeing. It seems to me it would be just feasible to go ahead and do it.
And we want to make sure you're kept in the loop. On the front end, like you said, hey, we're looking at doing this purchase next month. The following month, we come back and say, hey, this is what we purchased for X number of dollars, it came in under budget by so-and-so. That's kind of how we picture this going forward.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we'll move into, thank you, Chris. Move into committee information. Wayne Adcock, Finance, please.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a couple of items on the agenda this evening. The first being the monthly financial report, and I'll ask Ms. Thompson to do that for us.
Thank you, Mr. Adcock. You have the monthly financial report as of November 2018 in front of you. I will point out that what Logan had mentioned, what Larry had questioned, the CIP budget for utilities is in this that y'all get every month. So these are the projects that have already been approved by you that are here, and it gives you a projection of what potentially could be spent in what year. So if it's in another year out, you'll see that it's not necessarily in 2018 or 2019. Typically, most general fund CIP projects fall under SPLOST, so those typically fall under SPLOST. And that is, SPLOST revenues are in this, but the actual expenses are not, and I could potentially start including that if we want to in these reports. Even though this report is as of November, I wanted to point out that our property tax collections as of December 31st are at a 93% collection rate. This is a comparative to 80 to 85% several years ago before we turned it over to Walton County to start collecting those for us. So that was a great improvement when y'all approved to start having Walton County start collecting our property taxes for us. So obviously that's 93%. Some of those collections will start dwindling in January and February as well for those 2018. So we should be definitely close to what we budgeted for the 2018 collections on those. So that is something to point out. Our staff has been very busy over the month of November and December with our software implementation. We are fully implemented the financials and our payroll, and we are still working on that, but we have got that underway, and we're all still kind of learning, so we're all learning together. We will be going live with our utility billing still slated for February 11th, and staff has been training on that, and we will have on-site training again later this month. I have met with our external auditors, Malden and Jenkins, last week, and they will be doing their field work starting for the February 11th, and they'll be here for 2 weeks to do their annual audit. And staff is working on that as well to do our annual 2018 audit, and we'll be bringing that report to you sometime later this year, the first or second quarter. Other than that, I don't have a whole lot. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Hearing none, thank you, Beth. The second item is customer service and drive-through renovations. Mr. Bailey.
Okay, here we go, proof of the policy. This is a 2018 started project that was budgeted in CIP but didn't get done, so here we are 2019 to ask for an actual approval of it. What we're looking at is the entire rework and rehabilitation of our drive-through and our customer service area. We are down to, we actually have 4 lanes that exist, 2 work, and that's periodically. I mean, there are orange cones out there to close those off when one of those 2 don't work. If they both go down, I'm not real sure everybody's walking in. There is no drive-through. And it's just because our equipment and the system itself is so far outdated that you can't get parts. The repair people, the people that service it can't fix things because the system is so outdated. The lane spacing, you'll notice the bollards that stick up are rather, they're the color of cars more so than they are the color that was originally painted. Yeah. That's not what you want. The speakers themselves barely work. When you have 2 lanes going and you're taking, the bank chute thing, that's what I'll call it, and it comes in, you can't hear another person talking. So you essentially have to wait till all that's done. You have to ask the individuals to say what they said again. in the morning hours or when it's in the evening and it gets dark early, we don't have enough lighting out there to be able to see. People have to step out of cars for us to verify who they are. The security of when you step outside that door, there's no way to see what's around there. Our front window and the customer service, everything's open. And we are also currently not ADA compliant on the drop box and outside through the drive-through to where someone could actually get to it and reach it. Which I guess in the time of the building design and the original build probably wasn't that big of an issue, but it is now. If you're going to redo it, you're going to be ADA compliant. I think we should be. So what I'm asking for is we currently have $225,000 allocated to this particular line item. It's to also include some downstairs, some different things, additional offices, just changing things, improving them. But this is to use the Sizemore Group, who we've already approved to do the design build on our police department, to also, and they've been involved in this process, looked at our plans, looked at the drawings, to design, build, bid, and act as general contractor for the drive-through and the customer service area. And it's for an amount not to exceed $150,000. And that would include everything from start to absolute finish. And it's following part of the policy that reads professional services to where we're comfortable with this engineering firm from start to finish. Yeah, and that's the request, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
Are we rehabbing all 4 lanes?
We will go back with 3 that will operate. And then the one that's closest to the building will remain cut off. We'll probably just drop 2 bollards there to keep people from driving right next to the building because it's a difficult, if you think about those of you that's been to Athens First, possibly that first slot that's right next to the building, you can forget that. And then allow that, we'll build a ramp, and that part becomes the ADA compliant for the drop box. So essentially, we'll go to 3 lanes and then an ADA compliant.
Chris, when the Sizemore Group does the bidding out of this, do we approve the bids, or is that just between them and the contract?
Yes, we will see the bids, because essentially what they will do is work up the drawings and the design, which point we will see that, and then they will bid everything out. We will see those bids, and then we will proceed. Everything will have our stamp of approval.
Do we,
But this is the
pay
bid,
that
though.
subcontractor though, or do we pay Sizemore?
We pay Sizemore.
So we don't pay the people that actually do the work?
No, sir.
So what you're asking is you won't see the bid until after they don't got it? Basically what you're saying. Because you actually saying the bid is 150 for us to approve.
The bid is not to exceed 150, and that's for the full design, the bidding, the build, the construction, everything, until it's,
But we won't actually know what the price is for the bid out for a subcontractor
we will.
until when?
We'll know what the bid is before we start any building or any approving. If a bid comes back and it's greater than what we think it should be, then we drop back and punt, and we change the scope of the project so that we get it up under a budget number that we're comfortable with and that was approved by council.
So that the whole stays under 150?
Correct.
At or under?
Correct. The total bill to Sizemore will not exceed that 150 number, and I expect it to come in under that.
And how was the 150 determined?
It was what was budgeted for the drive-through rebuild that we had originally gotten just a budget number for the design, for the actual construction
Did
cost.
somebody price it out at one point?
It was,
I was wondering, I mean, it's 150, is it a realistic number? Do we even know?
the Garland company that we use and that we have had access to construction numbers at the time, and then we based it off of things based off of what Sizemore had actually told us they could design everything for. When they did the police department, we used all that, based it off, and created what we feel is a fairly accurate budget number and one that they feel like they can stay under. I'll tell you this, the budget number was a little bit higher of what we had originally had this, and I dropped it to keep them lower. And they will stay under.
And I know we use Sizemore for other things too. Is there a reason why we approved the total project for an amount not to exceed, as opposed to approving the design to start with.
Time. I mean, the way I look at it, we're kind of at a mission-critical point to, at any given point, we're without a drive-through. To where we're at stations that things just don't work. If I vet it out to the point that we allow Sizemore to draw up 2, 3, 4 designs, then I have to come back to council to have those designs approved. Then they bid it out. I have to wait another month, probably 2 months, the way the 30-day bid law works, to then come back to council. So I'm 3 months there. And at that point, your construction's gonna be based on, you know, how busy are people at that point. So I look at it, it's almost like the explanation prior, that if we do this process as a design build, which would be very similar to how we've done the police department, the wastewater treatment plant, CDBG grant jobs, then this allows us to get this done quicker as opposed to stringing it out into the summer before we're getting approval. And that's why I'm asking for an amount not to exceed. And again, if it comes back at a price that we're uncomfortable with, or that does look like it's going to encroach upon that $150,000 number, then it's something that we need to revisit, and we need to scale down the scope of it.
We need to break it apart like you're talking about. We can do that. But there is a very real possibility we may not have an operable drive-through.
Correct.
In the next couple months, so.
I mean, this
Be-
is something
just be
that
aware of that.
probably should have been done 4, 5, 6 years ago. I think it's been discussed off and on because there have been issues. I mean, 5 years ago, we were having a hard time fixing what we've got. And now all of a sudden, we're from 4 lanes to 2 lanes that may or may not work. So it scares me if we keep waiting. All of a sudden, you're going to lose that customer service aspect to your citizens.
Okay. Are there any other questions or discussion? If not, I need a motion from the committee to approve this and present it to full council for their approval.
I'll offer a motion to approve the customer service and drive-through renovations for an amount not to exceed $150,000, and present that to council next week.
Thank you. Motion by Ms. Malcolm. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Little. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries, and we will present that to full council next week.
Thank you,
Thank you,
and I
Mr.
will
Bailey.
bring the details back as we proceed with it so that you're informed.
Thank you, Mr. Adcock. Thank you, Mr. Bailey. I think you might want to stay there. Mr. Garrett, Airport.
Chris, you got any exciting news?
If only you lost weight by making that little short walk, that'd be great. Exciting news, not real sure. The airport, you can look at December's number. Fuel sales were down dramatically, but we were aware of that with the construction of the East Apron, with the rehabilitation and the expansion. And then also, once again, to bring back up the fact that it rained 32 out of 31 days. I did include a couple of charts at the bottom that I thought were a little bit telling of the airport. The main one is the revenue side. You can see where the revenues for the airport are actually generated. I know we've had a lot of hangar rental discussion. The hangar rental for 2018 was 21% of the revenue that's generated at the airport. Our lease agreements, which include your land leases, your FBO, other businesses out there, actually equated for 23%, and avgas sales equated for the other 56%. So fuel sales are actually huge at the airport. It's something that we've always pushed, and that's the reason you'll always see our avgas price, if not lower, we're only 10 cents higher than the next lowest around here. And that's how we move traffic, that's how we grow our businesses at the airport, that's how we increase our FBO and maintenance business, which helps everybody, brings more businesses in, we hope. The only other thing I have is the project for the rehabilitation and the expansion on the east side is in final stages. They came back yesterday after the holidays, first of the year, and started putting the top coat and the final coat on, at which point they will lower the one manhole cover that's out there. It will be 2 grade. And then they will come back and add in I think it's 16 tie-down spaces with the screw tie-downs. Put those in place. I look for that to be done, if weather will cooperate with us, probably in the next couple of weeks, which puts them roughly 30 to 45 days ahead of schedule. And then we will start on the west side with the taxi lane that will be put in place that will bring us into compliance with the state. And then 2, once again, February 13th, we have an airport inspection by the DOT that will then tell us what, if anything, we're out of compliance with going into this year, which at most would be a couple of trees possibly removed, maybe some signage that's changed, but I don't foresee it being a lot. Actually, should be one of the best inspections we've had, maybe in the last 10 years. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
If I'm looking at your chart correctly, Chris, the Avgas net profit is $3,557 for the year.
Yes, sir.
So while it may constitute a large part of the gross revenue, the net
Well,
income.
the net, yeah, the profit itself is because we try to remain what we charge very close to what we pay. We're roughly about a 10% markup at most, but I mean, if you look at the actual revenue, we actually sold almost $129,000 in Avgas.
I see that.
So, but the profit margin isn't that great, but it drives traffic.
But in constituting the makeup of net revenue, the percentage, to me, would be a little misleading to say that, I mean, in gross revenue, I understand that you're saying that it's 56% or whatever.
Right.
But it really is a small part of net revenue.
Well, it'd be a small part of the net profit because of our margin. But I mean, if you look at things like what our hangars bring in on a revenue side, and then we spend $25,000 to fix up and rehab hangars, then that dramatically kills that, which is why the airport profit loss is fairly low, if not negative. But it's also as close to positive as it's been in several years, just because of Avgas sales and driving traffic. But yes, absolutely understand what you're saying.
Going forward, I mean, we're not gonna be paying $25,000 a year to maintain.
Correct.
Building.
That should be a one-time thing about every 20 years.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed, knock on wood.
Do we got, are we situated where we'll be able to get any type of grant from DOT in
Yes.
2019?
We're actually, in 2019, we'll be applying for a LPV approach, which will, Ross can speak a little bit to this, which should help us dramatically with commercial flight, with your business owners, with your private jets and things coming in, because most of them will not land at an airport that does not have an LPV approach.
All of them won't.
Yeah. Every now and again, you might have one flying.
Airport not long enough for bigger jets, is it?
Yes,
It is.
it's over 5,000
Is
feet.
now.
Yeah, that was when we expanded it to the 5,000-foot runway. That's what allows those larger to come in. I think right now we're at about 52.
747. You had to.
Yeah. Hope not, but you
Wouldn't be a
could.
deal.
Might lose a few trees in the process.
That's it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the LPV, there's some signage, there'll be some tree removal. And then it just kind of depends on what the DOT comes back with. There's also the possibility, based on the inspection on February 13th, that we end up having to repave the runway. At which point you're looking at over $1 million expense there. But once again, should we encounter that, it's a large part of it's grant funds, just like this year it was. Because this year roughly we're working on a $1.3 million paving project, and the expense to the city is around $220, give or take.
Deal.
And as we've stated before, doing all these not-so-fun projects, but, you know, the apron, rehab, et cetera, trees, that gets us set up for more and more discretionary funding from the state each year.
To grow the airport.
To do really good growth projects, more hangars and things like that.
Yeah, the LPV approach would be a huge one. That would be a great one to get, and I think it's one of those that should funding and should money work out for the city throughout the year that we may or may not do, whether we receive DOT funding and bring that back before council for approval.
That will be all, I guess. Y'all have any more questions? That'll be it. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Norman. Moving next to Public Works, Mr. Dickinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Smith, would you give us the solid waste report, please?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dickinson. The November tonnage report is in your package. We collected over 1,069 tons of garbage and trash, and a little less than 108 tons of recycled material that got diverted from the landfill, including scrap tires. The projects we are preparing to get started this year, in particular the drainage project, it'll be done in-house. Jeremiah and his staff, street department will be doing it. I want to try to make sure we get in compliance with the review coming up in 2020 by the EPD. The tipping floor got to be done, but we'll be updating as we progress. The welding project got pushed back into this month because we had a lot of volume going into the transfer station with the holiday, and they just couldn't get in the building. So we'll probably schedule for a weekend and get that done. The only other thing I have, our holiday schedule, we're back on collection, we're back on schedule with the exception of limb and yard debris pickup. We should get that caught up by the end of the week. We are picking up Christmas trees. We're just asking the citizens to remove the stands and any type of plastic material on the live trees. They're going to the inert field, but if you got a flock tree or pre-manufactured tree, we'll get it and put it in the trash. That's the only way it can go. But we are collecting them. In the past, there were some bring one to the chipper programs where you could get a seedling, but I don't think that's going on right now. But we are going to be putting them in the inert landfill so we can mulch them and use the product. Also, we got some dumpsters that we're going to be upgrading in the downtown district. We got a lot of greasy, old-looking dumpsters that need to be taken care of. So we will be in the process of doing that. And I take any questions that you might have.
Is there another size up for the downtown dumpsters, or is that as big a dumpster we can handle downtown?
That's pretty much the 8 cubic yard dumpster is the largest we got.
Ross, you had talked about that dumpster that could be steered between particular businesses right up against the back wall.
Yeah. Oh, well, ideally, it would be some form of a dumpster corral per block. So what we're talking about is a very expensive, much bigger project. But just a shared community dumpster for each, I guess, quadrant of downtown, if you will, something that,
Would be like a rollaway?
it could be one of the compactor style dumpsters, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it has to be a compactor. I can't use an open top for a restaurant because of inspection.
Something that would allow a much prettier view of a dumpster in downtown. You wouldn't even be able to see it, and then something that is more organized than what we have to deal with right now. But I think that's something that we've kind of been working on in the DDA meetings, and then, of course, the biggest holdup is funding for it.
Well, as Wayne Street further develops, it's going to be a necessity.
And especially with the new restaurants coming in on the, I guess, that side of town.
East side.
Because restaurants, I mean, there are tons and tons of boxes and trash.
Right.
So, with, potentially 6 to 9 new restaurants opening up in 19 or 20, that's going to be a big influx of trash. So,
All right, thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Still, would you present streets and transportation, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Just highlighting a few areas from the report you have in front of you. On the admin side, we rented out the community building 9 times. Several more times in December as through the holiday season is a pretty busy time over there at the facility on Church Street. The Fleet Maintenance Division continues to perform preventive and corrective maintenance throughout the fleet of the city. highlighting some stuff that our street crew is doing now that we are a few days without rain. We're back doing some concrete work, some sidewalk repair in place and some curb repair in place. We'll continue to, working with Rodney's water crew, going to continue and finish the sidewalk project over here on Highland. Once that water line gets replaced and done in there, we'll wrap that up, as well as a replacement repair on William Street on the bulk of that sidewalk there. That's be the two areas that we're seeing at recent, in the near future. But currently, we're in maintenance mode for the winter on our right-of-ways. The leaf truck's running every day. Right now, we're looking at 3.5 weeks making a run through the city. And the wet that we've experienced has knocked the leaves down. Everybody seems to be getting them out at the same time, which delays getting through that route. It is a task, but those guys are staying on it, and they're working long weeks, making through with that. Other than that, we're in winter mode. We've got some cold weather coming. We are crossing our fingers that we don't experience much freeze this winter. Logan and I have discussed that. If we get freeze, hard freezes, numerous nights in a row, with as wet as things are, we're going to have some serious issues with our infrastructure, as far as it coming apart. So we need some, don't mind the cold, kill all the bugs, but we want to try to stay away from the freeze if at all possible. And I'll be glad to take any questions.
All right, appears there are no questions. That's all we have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. I appreciate it. Moving to utilities, Mr. Little.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item is the electric and telecom report, Mr. Thompson.
Yes, Mr. Little, thank you. As Mr. Probst said, we are working on the Spring Street project. Trees were delivered last week before. You will start seeing lights go up from the start of the project about the library out to Plaza Drive. Then we will skip and go from Mountain View out to the end of the project. This is due to a couple of things. The big thing is the redesign of some of the drainage for the project in the middle of there. But the other problem is there is a Comcast fiber that goes to a cell tower that we're having to work around, and we're having to figure out some ways to make that happen. But we'll figure it out. We always do. But those two sections will be done first, and then we'll move into the second section. Update on the North Broad that I don't have on the deal here. I met with Windstream today, and after 20-something months, they will finally be off all of those poles as of Friday. They promised me this time, so we'll start pulling those poles in front of the water plant to facilitate those guys putting the drainage in down Broad.
Does that include the pole in front of Silver Queen?
Oh, not yet. That's only been going on for 9 months. I did meet with them today, but we worked out with Silver Queen's construction Garland group to let them move forward, how to work around that pole to make them move forward. But I made Windstream very aware. I'm using some of the owners of the buildings where they are attached to the buildings on Wayne Street to force them to remove some of their wiring, which will force them to hence remove that pole.
Great,
But
thank you.
we're on it. We can only do what we can do. The one bad thing about right-of-way law is the LEC, the local exchange carrier, which is Windstream, does have, they're the only ones with legal federal rights to the right-of-way. And so I've got to work with them. I don't know how much I got to work with them, but I've got to work with them. Construction has started in Stone Creek, the telecom and electric. It's going well. It's just raining every week. We finally got a little work here, so we're a little dry time. Hopefully it'll stay dry over the weekend and we can get the rest of that infrastructure installed so we can get that project moving forward. Design for the electric and telecom distribution changes on 2nd Street to accommodate the development of the townhomes that are going on the corner of 2nd and Broad. That has started. They actually changed a little bit of their design on me today at the latest, which threw another little wrinkle in it, but we're working around that. Mr. Middlebrooks has some issues with some of their stuff they're doing too, so it's a work in progress, but we're moving forward. It's actually starting to move dirt and move ground. You'll see some action going on down there. In telecom, the first phase of the CMTS install that y'all approved a couple of months ago is in place for all node groups, which means we have doubled the capacity to all node groups from a little over 600 megabits to 1.2 gig. The new CMTS has been delivered. Once that's installed, we will have, all these node groups will have, in theory, 2.4 gig delivered to each one instead of 1.2. So we'll quadruple that capacity across the network. And you'll probably see, what you'll probably see as a throughput as a customer is less buffering, more people can be on the internet in the home without causing buffering issues. And those calls have dropped tremendously since we finished this first phase. And I will take any questions you may have.
Are we, Daryl may be able to speak to this as well, are we requiring all new developments to put in fiber?
Can't require that. We are offering that to everyone, and everyone so far has taken it. So I can't see where someone wouldn't. We are putting in microduct in the Stone Creek. We are putting in microduct into the new townhomes. Mr. Rosenthal and his project has requested the same thing. It brings up the cost of their project, I mean, the value of their project to have it. The development you're looking at for approval across the creek, across the road from Stone Creek has also requested it. So it's just something, if you're a developer, you gotta have it.
And how long will it take for us to reach them?
We're in front of their developments right now.
We're already there.
We have a fiber that runs
Both sides.
down Church Street all the way to Athens. So the fiber's sitting in front of them.
Okay, do we have fiber running out Alcovy yet? Way to go.
So does the people on Church Street, where Mr. Dixon lives, for example, does he have access to fiber?
Not at this point. What you have to do to distribute this, I can distribute this over one fiber in a new development. The cost to develop, to send it into a new development is shared with the developer, of course. I send the one fiber into the box, for lack of a better term, and I distribute that into 300 to 400 homes. So what we have to do to go back and hit existing sites is string what we call our microduct throughout the town, which is expanding out of the downtown project now. And it just takes time. So what we're using is the CMTS project to increase the capacity to those homes to buffer us past the time it's going to take us to get the fiber to those locations.
It's going past Mr. Dickinson's house, it just.
That fiber's, yes. Well, it's a,
That on purpose.
well, there's a 96 count fiber that goes down through there.
It's just a good example of where it's located.
Yes, sir. There's a 96 count fiber that leaves the Napa area. We've got a splice there that goes all the way to Athens that we do for GPW, for the University of Georgia. And you've got to manage those fibers. So inside that one node or that node group, let's just use Mr. Dickinson's home as an example, feeds off of Pine Park. Well, there's 700 homes. I don't have 700 fibers there. So what you have to do is increase that fiber count and then what we call pond out or passive optical network out to the individual homes. The first project that y'all have approved in the CIP this year would be the subdivision off of Michael Etchison that has no telecommunications service from the city. And that's under design now, or final design to be moved forward.
Any other questions for Mr. Thompson? Not, thank you. Mr. Middlebrooks?
Thank you, Mr. Little.
Water.
Just a couple updates. The Bryant Road steel gas main replacement's been completed. Young Streets should be completed, if not this week, next week. So we're winding those two jobs up. Carl survey crews have been in town this week for the CDBG, also finishing up the Alcovy River sewer extension. So those are moving along well. Quick update on the new offices at the water plant. They delivered sheetrock today. If everybody stays on schedule, we should, completion date should be the end of February, if everything goes well. And I'll share those pictures with y'all at some point in an email, but it's coming together really nice. Very nice looking building. And then the sidewalks, or the concrete and the alleyway over here at Spring and Livery Stable's been completed. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but it turned out very nice too, so very proud of that. And that's all I got. If you got any questions, I'll be more than happy to take them.
When will we get the gas lights out front?
We got these, but we should be installing these on this building, if not this week,
Right,
next
yeah.
week. Yeah.
Okay. So, are we putting any information out to the citizens about their opportunity to purchase?
We're not, the only thing we'll do on those is just refer them over to the company. We're not gonna be selling them.
Right, okay,
Yeah, we just can give them a list of places they can buy them.
okay.
There is or has been that I've heard about in the past and not been fixed. There's a gas leak. And it's not heavy, but it's coming out of the ground right behind Amici. I was at a funeral there right around New Year's Eve, and it was pointed out quite a few times. And I don't know if it's really us or them. It's come up a couple of times, so it must not be bad enough to make a difference. But if you would, please take a look at that.
I will.
If there's ever a gas leak, please call it.
No, yeah, well, you're exactly right, and that's what we did. That's what we did. But they've said, oh, it's been going on for years, and it's minimal. You have to put your nose right down on it to smell it, unless the wind blows right. But it's clearly,
But is that the meter set?
yeah,
Okay, so it could possibly be the regulator or something, yeah.
okay.
Could be something on their side. Okay,
Thank you, Rodney.
put in a work order now.
That's all we have, Mayor.
I did stop people from smoking around it. Moving to, thank you, Mr. Little. Moving to public safety, Mr. Bradley is the new chairman.
I guess officially, the Public Safety Committee would like to welcome Chief Owens and Chief Watts with us tonight. We're glad to have you on board. And so we're going to start with Chief Owens with the fire department report.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. As you can see through our month of November, the numbers that we ran, we're slightly going up on our fire calls. In December was a slight increase on that, but I'm hoping to have a complete closeout of 2018 in next month's report, so you can kind of see an overview of everything a little bit better. Other than that, we did finish out the year with just over 2,700 fire and emergency calls. This month, we're actually starting our Firefighter 2 program throughout the department for all of our new hires and just firefighters in general, to take them up one more level as far as certification. And we're looking to this month start our recruit program. We skipped it last year, but bringing that back this year, and that's where we basically open it up to our citizens with no certification, no experience, no anything. Bring them in and see if we can bring them on board as far as our recruit program and get them state certified as far as firefighters. So we're going to be, y'all probably going to be seeing that here in the next 3 weeks. We'll start advertising and publicizing that. Otherwise, that's all I have. Is there any questions?
Any questions?
The training of those potential future firefighters, are we doing that at Georgia Utility Training?
Yes, part of that, there's a lot of classroom training on that, but as far as all the hands-on aspects, the skill sets, that'll definitely be happening down at our training facility down there at Gouda. Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Chief Watts?
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Month of November was kind of, I won't say slow, but it's the lowest number of calls for service we've had for the year with the 2,951. I don't know if that's because of the weather or that's usually about the time of year that everybody wants to come visit us at the PD and bring cakes and cookies and slow us down a little bit. Our officers did participate in over 686 hours of training. Our Part 1 crimes, which is your major violent crimes, they're down from what they were in 2017. Part 2 is up just a little bit. We did make 90 adult arrests and 2 juveniles. We did issue out 174 warnings, 149 citations, and we also assisted FBI and GBI on a case that they had going on here in the city that I'm sure you guys are aware of that made the news. Our officers did participate in over 10 community events, and November is the time of year that we go around and start hitting business owners up and collecting money for December's when we do our Shop with a Hero. And I'll say this past December was our biggest turnout yet as far as being able to sponsor families and kids. And I don't know if any of y'all have ever came out and participated in that, but I tell you, that is a true blessing to be a part of and to see how you can make a difference. And we get letters back from those families. I actually sent out some letters this week where they came in and posted it, sent to the whole police department, how it just, made a difference in some people's families. And I mean, it's a blessing. If you ever get a chance to come out and participate with us, I'd welcome any of you to come. And we also did the escort in November, where we escorted the Hurricanes. We gave a police escort outside the city, and it was great to be a part of that. And that's about it. If y'all have any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer any of them.
I would like for us to discuss, if possible, at our retreat, possibly solutions for the littering that we're encountering that is just growing by leaps and bounds, which I know Jeremiah will appreciate, but it's going to have to be in conjunction with, a policing effort as well. But I think it's something we seriously need to talk about.
Completely agree. This isn't so much a question or comment for you specifically, RV, but for all of our public works, streets and transportation, utilities, and our public safety departments. I know going through Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, just tell those guys we really appreciate the work that they do, because a lot of us were home, and I'm sad to say they couldn't be there with their families, but I certainly appreciate every moment they spent working.
Yes, sir.
Chief, do you know if any time recently made it any type of citations or arrest or whatever for littering?
Have we made any recently on that? I would have to go through what I just quoted here on the 174 warnings and 149 citations. I know we have in the past, yes, sir. And that's something that, if you want us to step it up on and increase it even more in certain areas, we definitely can do that.
And we don't have as many signs, it seems, as we used to.
Have to get with Mr. Steele to see
Do
if we
we?
can do a count on
It
that.
doesn't,
Get some numbers together, if we need to bulk up the signage in some of those areas, we can. I wish the sign worked.
I know. It's going to definitely take more than a sign.
And going back to the public safety side, maybe if we looked at unsecured loads, I think a lot of our debris is coming from the unsecured loads out of trucks. That may be something to look at.
And I think Danny's hit that hard already, right? The unsecured loads.
Yeah, and we have to constantly do it, and I think enforcement will help.
And education of the public, when they see those trucks, if they could call it in. Because that's a massive amount of litter in one bang. I mean, it's unreal.
Any other questions for police? Thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Moving to planning and code, Ms. Malcolm.
Thank you. Mr. Stone and Mr. Kelly?
All right, the code department report for November, fairly standard. We had 5 new businesses get their business license. We had 6 businesses that were closed or didn't renew their business license. Those were all residential, home-based businesses, so either hopefully they moved on to greener pastures or just needed to make a change. but those were closed out. We also had the city marshal. He removed 54 signs from the roadway in that time frame. Did 162 repair cleanup orders and re-inspections. Historic preservation had some COA requests. One was withdrawn by the First Baptist Church, 308 South Broad Street. 212 Walton Street's going to be a new home that's being constructed, so they granted that COA as well. And the redevelopment of the mega mess is about to be a mega asset on the corner of South Broad and Spring Street. They've started doing some demolition, nothing right now that's requiring permits. They're getting remarkably close to that, but they haven't yet. So we're working with them to make sure that that comes off without a hitch and becomes an asset on that corner rather than what it's been in the past. Planning and zoning heard several rezone and COA requests, which you all have acted on already in December. Addressing the litter thing too, since it was brought up, I just thought it might be a good time to try and possibly reestablish some sort of relationship where we could get trustees to start picking up around town again, if that's possible. I didn't know if that's something that's being considered, and I was going to throw that out at the planning meeting, but just since it was brought up, that's another thing that we could possibly try and do. And if you have any questions, one other thing I did want to mention, is it's not on your agenda tonight, but it will be on the agenda for next week, final approval of the final plat for Phase 1 of Stone Creek. The top 49 lots is what that will include, and we'll be finalizing the development agreement in the next few days. Just didn't quite gel to be on the agenda for tonight, so we'll have it all ironed out by then. And again, it'll include the 49 lots at the top of the neighborhood, and they've got the streets paved and the entrances coming together nicely. So I think it's gonna look great, and hopefully it'll sell well, and we'll get some more people in town.
Okay. Are there any questions? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Thanks, Ms. Malcolm. Do you have anything else?
I don't.
Or I just skipped over whatever else you might want to say.
No.
Mr. Bradley, Economic Development, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We just have one item on the agenda. That's our economic development report. Ms. Crosby.
Thank you very much. A couple things to point out in the report. One is that Major Humphreys just did a crowdfunding campaign, and they used that same tool that we did our own internal campaign and kind of promoted it out to local businesses, and it was successful. They met their goal. So we're excited to see another local business and project use that. Hopefully we'll have more people try to use that tool in the future. Also, Young Game Changers will be coming the end of this month. Their introduction to Monroe will be Thursday, January 31st through Friday, February 1st. I'll send you more details. There will be a morning welcome when they arrive. If any of you are able to attend, just to say your names, they can start putting a face with our local elected officials. That'd be wonderful. And there will be a welcome dinner that Thursday evening. I'll send you details for those. And also wanted to make sure you're aware of the downtown celebration. We're going to be doing a dessert celebration this year at the Wayfarer Livery Stable, and that'll be on Tuesday night, January 29th. You'll also be getting an invitation to that event. That's when we give out our awards for downtown excellence and just kind of celebrate the year. All of our sponsors come, most of our downtown businesses that are able to attend, and that's a great time to look back over the year. We had a great year last year. Also wanted to update you on the Downtown Development Revolving Loan Fund projects that are in process right now. This is a tool that we have access to as a Main Street community. It's low interest rate loans that the DDA is an applicant for. We never touch the money. They pass straight through us and go directly to projects. And there's 2 different loans that are available to local renovation projects that fit our downtown plan. And one's through the Georgia Cities Foundation, which is noted by GCF there, and the other's through DCA. And so just recent projects that have been approved and funded is the Your Pie project. It's not going to close in January, but it will close soon since they're finished. These are loans that come for permanent financing once the project's complete. L.R. Berger was approved for a GCF and a DCA loan. Walton Mill has an application in for a renovation they're doing on one of the front parts of their building for new commercial space and food service. 110, 114 West Spring Street is doing a combined loan pending full full application. John's Supermarket renovation is also going to pursue a combined DCA and GCF. And then 320 South Madison is, they're looking at doing a combined too, and that it's in the IPA, or the initial project assessment. Just wanted you guys to be aware, because that's a real benefit and tool that make local projects feasible in our downtown. And we use those a lot, and we're going to keep using them as long as they're helpful to local businesses and property owners. We're putting together the event calendar for 2019. Hope to have that finalized by the end of this month. Then we'll be back before you for concerts, and with that full calendar, we'll do our card again and send that out. Trying to add some new things this year, which we're very excited about. Some of those are listed. Once that's finalized, we'll start getting the word out and be excited for another year full of great community events. Be happy to answer any questions you have.
I just want to say I've received tons of comments about downtown, and they've all been positive, so thank you to yourself and Leanne for all the hard work, because it's, we have an awesome downtown. We're proud of it.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And thank you for the commercials. They looked great.
Oh, yeah, and hopefully, we did air them during the national championship game, and we were able to pick up some additional packages with the CVB funding is what funds those commercials and advertising. So glad you saw it.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Please do keep in mind on the 31st with the Young Game Changers coming, that is a huge deal. We're bringing in 48 people from around the state under the ages between 26 and 40, correct? And they're going to be tasked with several questions to help shape our future. So it's in all of our best interest to at least come introduce ourselves and put our best feet forward. Normally next, we'd be going to our parks segment, and Myosha Crawford is our new chairperson for that committee. As SPLOST was approved, and 30% of that will be geared toward our parks. I've asked Myosha to please chair that committee. Along with her, I'll have Mr. Adcock, Mr. Bradley, Mr. Ross Bradley, and Ms. Malcolm as her committee members. So just keeping you in the loop on that. Move into items of discussion for a rezone at 1600 East Church Street. Mr. Stone.
Yes, last time it was tabled for some additional information, and we did receive the Declaration of Protective Covenants, the conditions, restrictions, and easements for Charleston Manor. And under Article 7, it discusses the restrictions and the rules, and some of the positive that I did see in it was the lease terms under hardship cannot exceed by the owner more than 15%, which I thought was very positive. So it will be primarily, fee simple owned by the owners themselves, and I thought that was a very good condition. Also, in there, it did talk about, Mr. Dixon requested some additional information on construction requirements, and they did put in that the dwellings would have 712 pitch roof, contain shutters, gutters. Front exteriors such as dwellings should be 75% brick or stone. They did submit pictures that did not correlate with what this action was, but late this afternoon, we did get a submittal that came back in that actually had renderings demonstrating what they were saying that they were going to provide, so we thought that was a positive as well. At this time, I would like for him to answer any questions that the council may have in regards to the development.
Thank you for your time. As a reminder, my name is Stephen Giles on behalf of the owner, KFP Enterprises, Inc. With the council's feedback, in the last meeting, we've been working with LGI, the builder, to be more specific on the covenants and the architectural requirements. As he mentioned, the first submittal was submitted with some pictures to demonstrate general elevations that did not, at the time, have a brick or stone. That was a mistake on my part, where I should have footnoted that this is more of the look and the feel of the house, but was absent but the hardy plank would have been replaced with brick or stone. Subsequent to that, we've had sketch work done on the actual elevations of the houses, which was submitted this afternoon. It was not a high resolution sketch. We're getting that refined, and we'll be presenting that. We do have the covenants in place that talk specifically about the pitch of the roof. And we're really working hard to make sure I went through and looked at the city, and even driving tonight to the city, actually, just to give you a feel of where I'm coming from, I live in Suwanee. I'm a native Atlantan, Powder Springs, Marietta, to Norcross, to Suwanee, so I've been around. And I told my wife about a month ago that, and even driving tonight, I was like, you know what? I just said, what do you think about moving to Monroe? Because I really love this community. Like even driving out tonight, I was driving past horse farms and beautiful green pastures, and the sun was setting, and it was gorgeous. And I love the downtown feel, and I love this community that you guys have created. It's an amazing thing, and I see it as very attractive. And the last thing I want to do is bring something in that's going to do anything to harm that. And so I have been talking with LGI specifically to make sure they understand that the city and me on behalf of the owner and developer want something that the city can be proud of and that we can be proud of, to have our name associated with. And so we're working hard to make sure of that. And I would welcome any feedback, anything that would give us direction on where we may be going wrong on that, to make sure that this is something, at the end of the day, that everybody drives past and says, glad to be a part of that and glad they're here. So with that, I will open it up for any questions, if anybody has it at this time.
Well, I'm not so sure it's a question, as just some comment. As you know, I'm pretty skeptical about what was presented previously.
Yes, sir.
And I think I expressed this last time we were here. My concerns are not so much with your entity as with LGI. I've done a lot of research on LGI, and as best I can tell, they've done about a half a dozen developments in various outlying counties around Atlanta. And what they've put on the ground in each of those developments is, in my opinion, exactly what we don't want and don't need. And I have seen those most recent renderings. I saw them this afternoon. Those do look better. I think we've got some more work to do. But I will just tell you this, my position would be if LGI was going to come in and build in this development what they have built in the half dozen developments that I've seen, I couldn't support that in any form or fashion. Because it looks to me like in those 6 developments, they have 3 basic house plans, and it's not anything we want.
Yes, sir.
And you know how the internet is. It's lit up with negative commentary about LGI and their various problems. And I understand how that works. People quite often, I guess it's easier to be a critic than to be a cheerleader for something. But I haven't seen a whole lot that's cheerleading on behalf of LGI. LGI is, for this development, going to change its model and do something that truly is a traditional design neighborhood. Maybe I could support that, but you still got a ways to go to convince me.
Yes, sir.
The other thing is, I don't know if the city attorneys have had a chance to wade through the covenants. I'm working on wading through them. In many respects, those are very good covenants, far superior to some of the things that I see. But there's still some things in there that I have some questions and reservations about.
If I may respond, thank you very much for the feedback. It is certainly a dance where we both play a part, but I'm here representing the owner and the developer, and as such, I have the leverage over anybody coming in to put in place whatever needs to be in place. And again, you know, I'm serious. I had that conversation with my wife. And so sitting here looking at this, I really don't want my name associated with anything that I can't walk away and say I'm proud to be a part of. And to the degree that you see something that needs to be different, I welcome that feedback. Be glad to have that discussion with LGI and make sure that the product that is being put on the ground is a high-quality product. We have talked about this. They understand the reputation and what's out there. Even if you go to their website, you won't see this. This is them branching out in a new direction to say we see an opportunity in a great community for us to step out and build a high-quality product for a different demographic, and we want to participate in that. And so what they're doing is working to meet that standard. And that's the reason I say I welcome the feedback, because I want to make sure, hopefully we're able to get there. But at the end of the day, if we're not with this specific builder, they want to make sure I understand what the requirements are for the right partner to come in and do that. So again, any feedback, I welcome. I reserve the right to be smarter tomorrow than I am today. And so I thank you for putting the time and effort that all of you have into it. I really appreciate it. And any feedback you might have on the covenants, I'd welcome that as well. Any questions?
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
The covenants they're very comprehensive. I'm not sure I've ever read any quite so comprehensive. But as we all know, covenants are only good as those that enforce them.
Yes, ma'am.
And you reference the Board of Directors many times, and I'm assuming that is considered the Architectural Control Committee or whatever. Do you normally wait until the project is 75% built out before you appoint that board? How do you govern that?
I would have to actually speak with LGI on that piece specifically. I'm just going to tell you I don't have enough to answer that question.
I'd like to have, if you could bring that back to us.
Ms. Malcolm.
And then, of course, who would make up that board, because it's pretty general.
That's one of the things I have a concern about, and I want to discuss with the attorneys about
Okay.
tightening up some of those provisions, because you're absolutely correct about how that works. And when it passes from the declarant as the Architectural Committee to the directors as the Architectural Standards Committee,
It becomes
things
real
can
shape,
happen.
yeah, clouded. Okay.
If we can talk after the meeting, I'd welcome any feedback, or as you guys have it, I'll be glad to take that back and tighten up wherever we can. Any other questions you guys might have for me?
Mr. Stone, is there anything we're missing?
I would, we talked about the different designs that you had proposed, and I noticed on what you submitted, there's really, you show 4, but there's actually 2 designs that vary. Is that the extent of what's going to be offered, since you got 122 homes proposed there? Really, are there more than just those 2 options?
Yes, I believe there are 3 or 4 different floor plans to pick from. We were trying to meet the time frame of the January meeting, and we actually, frankly, had some more sketches that were supposed to come in, and last minute, they told us not going to happen for whatever reason. I also wanted a rendering. If you go back and look at the original book that was presented, one of the very first pages has a bird's eye view over the front community where it was commercial, and you had all the trees. I really wanted that to be a sketch or the amenity package for everybody to see and understand what was proposed originally 12 years ago and what we are proposing now. And unfortunately, the designer came back and said timing was going to be short on that. But there'll be more choices than that. Those are the elevations we were able to get to show and demonstrate this is in keeping with the covenants as outlined.
And I don't know if you're familiar with Clark's Grove in Covington.
Yes, ma'am, I actually drove through it. Beautiful little
I would
neighborhood.
love to think that that's what this would become.
Yes, ma'am. My neighborhood looks pretty similar. Most of our houses are rear entry with wide sidewalks and trees, very open, great for community, and the layout looks very similar, frankly, to the one that I live in. And I think it'll be a great thing once it gets going.
Well, and I guess my thought is, the renderings show some really nice trimmed columns on the front. And I'm just not sure that how close can we hold them to those standards on those renderings? Because, many times you end up with just blank columns, no trim, basically posts for
Yes, ma'am.
porches. And so that would be just a question of how detailed as a city and, can we be? And what our expectations are versus what's presented in a photo. We'll talk about that.
Okay. I'll be welcome to stay around and talk with anybody after the meeting.
And do you have an estimate on the number of elevations you're going to have per floor plan? So,
I don't, and I apologize. I really thought this was,
no, that's okay. I understand. We just want to make sure that with 120,
122, yeah.
that you don't have 4 plans side by side that
all
everybody
look the
uses the
same.
same elevation.
Yep.
Because it's tough enough to differentiate a small lot product. I just want to make sure you have plenty of options and stick to them. Are there any other questions or comments?
My biggest concern is the 4-foot setback, distance between the houses, meaning 8 feet between each setback on the sides. That's just worries me to death. But
Yes, ma'am.
if everything else can be really, perfected, I know we can't change that.
Yep. One of the things they are putting together is a presentation from a top down, so you can see the lot and see how the house sits on the lot. It'll give you a better feel for what that would look like.
Ms. Malcolm, just briefly, don't want to belabor the point, but going to the sort of issues that you raised, concern, I have reviewed the covenants generally, and sort of the meat and potatoes that you guys are looking for, I believe, is your architectural guidelines. Those have not been provided. I know we have some sketches, but our advice to you is going to be this, is the way these covenants work in any development is the declarant retains power to the very end. That's very common. If there are specifics that you guys want to remain, because the way they have the ability to modify the covenants. So you would, if you were wanting to approve things, you would want to condition that the declaration of covenants have certain non-amendable provisions. And that would be where those specifics about what does the, what was it, the porch?
Width of the column.
The width of the column or the depth of the porch or the minimum size of the
all
porch.
those
So
things.
I definitely think there's progress being made and you have visuals and visuals to work by. But my suggestion would be to the applicant in working with the code office that the meat and potatoes or the devil in the details that really I hear y'all wanting is in the Exhibit A to the covenants, which is the architectural guidelines, which is referenced in these covenants in Section 6.3. That's what you guys need, and that's what that's the biggie that needs to be hammered out and fleshed out, because it not only addresses setbacks, and they have general setbacks already identified.
We do.
4 foots and 10s and 5s and all those, but then it also gets into those additional architectural guidelines, which can also dictate a minimum number of visual front facades. Wow. And then you can double that number with your mirroring effects. So those are that's where your meat and potatoes needs to go. And that's where y'all can make progress on seeing if this can be, if this is something that the council wants to approve. So you would certainly make that a condition of your zoning, and you would make it that that condition of zoning is a non-amendable portion of your covenants. And we're happy to work with Code Office and the applicant as you direct.
Okay, thank you.
And part of the covenants do show that the association owns the common areas.
That is correct.
We've faced one recently where that wasn't the case, and just wanted to make sure.
They do own the common areas, and most of these documents are going to say that, but the real important process is to making sure that that association gets handed
Hand it
off
over.
properly.
Sure.
It's the handoff where that trouble comes into play.
Right.
I would just, I guess it's more of a comment. I hear him saying he wants to do everything possible to make this happen. And I would hope that by next week, you can work with Stone or Rosenthal or whoever we need to work with, so that by the time we get here next week, a presentation can be made that would answer the questions and enable the up or down vote or whatever to take place next week.
Yes, sir. Do everything I can to be ready for that.
I think we're good, and we'll
Thank
see you
you.
next week.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you. Moving on to the first reading of the Historic Preservation Commission Membership Ordinance Amendment. Mr. Rosenthal.
Yes, Mayor, this is just something that's coming down the pipeline through the code office because of some DNR regulations to get compliant. It's essentially moving your HPC commission appointment 10 years from 5 years to 3 years. That's all that is doing. You'll have first reading on that next week. Happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Next on the agenda is the first reading for performance. We're going to skip over that one this week and move to number 4, the resolution. Open Records Officer, Mr. Probst.
Yeah, and back on number 3, we've just asked to remove that from this agenda pending more work on that resolution.
Thank you.
For the Open Records Officer resolution, this comes up each year. This resolution designates the city administrator as the Open Records Officer and the city clerk as the alternate Open Records Officer in the city administrator's absence. That'll be before you next week.
Thank you. Moving to, are there any questions about that? Moving to next item for approval, the election qualifying fees. Mr. Probst.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, as you know, it's a election year. So districts 1, 2, 4, 5, and 7 shall have the qualifying fee set at $180. This is 3% of the previous year's gross annual salary for the office.
Great, thank you. And do we address that again next week?
Yes, sir.
Gotcha, thank you. Next, items requiring action. Need to elect a vice mayor. Mr. Adcock has been my vice mayor for my first year and done an outstanding job. Do I hear a motion?
Move to nominate Wayne Adcock as vice mayor.
I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Little. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Dickinson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Next appointment, council representative to the Downtown Development Authority. Mr. Bradley served in that role. Mr. Ross Bradley served in that role for his first year on council and has done an outstanding job, in my opinion. Everything's rocking and rolling downtown. I need a motion to appoint Ross as council representative to the DDA.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Dickinson. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second.
A second by Mr. Adcock, and I'm going to do a third by Ms. Malcolm. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. I now need a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
I have a motion by Ms. Malcolm. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Ross Bradley. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries.